Okay, this is our lecture for supply, which is much quirkier. I believe the assignment number is 5. If you understand the way this video program works, I tried to go look at my notebook list. It covers that screen, but anyway, there's someone in one of my classes with the initials MH who will keep track of what page number we're on. And remember, I don't play gotcha with notebooks. I'll give you several days notice before we take them up. Anyway, this is supply. This is designed for a Wednesday. This is designed for Wednesday. And so I've got to go kind of quick here. It's an important topic. And for the record, those of you who are in Euro, I know about the shirt I'm wearing, but I recorded this on Tuesday. Only a few kids will get that, maybe none. All right, so this is supply. All right, and it's quirky. So I want you to write that in your notes. So write this down. Demand is easy. Supply is quirky. I have to tell a demand story. Here's how quirky demand is. My son and I talked him into going hiking with me in Georgia once, this place called the Pine Mountain Trail. We did a 30-mile hike in 3 days. And it was, maybe it was a 20-mile hike in 3 days. Anyway, it was easy for him. For the old fat guy here, it wasn't easy. And it was not easy to get my video game son away from his video games for 3 days. And the temperature got down to like 15 degrees, but we had good camping gear. But anyway, we hiked for 3 days. We were eating canned food, eating just stuff on the trail. We get back in the car, and we're going to drive back to Florida. Now, we're up in Georgia, near Warm Springs, Georgia, where FDR died. If you know about FDR, we went to the park there and all that. It was along the hike. Anyway, we get in the car, and we're coming back, and Papa John's Pizza had been running these ads. I don't even go to Papa John's. It's not a political thing or anything like that. I'm a Little Caesars and a Pizza Hut guy. Hungry Howie's once in a while. I mean, I don't hate Papa John's. I actually did go there a couple of weeks ago, but it's just not someplace I normally go because I really am a Little Caesars guy. But we get in the car, and we have been eating trail food for 3 days, and my son says, one of us brings up these Papa John's pizzas commercials we've been seeing. Something called like a 4-cheese pizza or something. This is like 8 years ago, and we just get this immediate overwhelming desire to eat one of these pizzas. And so back then, we didn't have good cell phone coverage. We were on T-Mobile. I know it's better now. But anyway, we had one of those old GPS's, Garmin's, that you put up on the dashboard. And so we got in there and looked. The nearest Papa John's was, I want to say, 2 hours away. And we were starving. And for 2 hours, we drove by McDonald's, Burger King, Waffle House. We always call it Waffle Hut. Crystal, on that trip, I made a deal with my son. If I ever say, let's eat at Crystal, he's supposed to slap me. As a matter of fact, if I ever say the word Crystal, he's supposed to slap me. So anyway, we were just obsessed with this pizza we've never had before. And we drove past every restaurant and fast food joint in the world to get to this place. And we were so scared we'd get there like after 9 o'clock and it would be closed. We called in advance to make sure they would be open. And then we ordered it off our cell phones about 15 minutes before we got there. And went in and so anyway, my point is our demand for that pizza is high. Okay? As soon as we went there and ate one, usually when you want something that bad, you want to eat something so bad, once you have it, you're kind of disappointed. You build up your brain. We ate it, and we were like, this is the best pizza we've ever had in our lives. Just probably because we were starving. And so the thing is, we could have had a bad experience and never wanted one again. But demand, you can get up in the morning and hear that, I know I'm not a little off topic, but you can hear that Tylenol cures COVID. And the demand for Tylenol will go up immediately. You jump in your car, you drive down everybody's going to the drugstore trying to get Tylenol. I guess you could take what's in your cabinet. So you're all rushing down to get, buy something, buy Tylenol at the drugstore, and as you're in the car driving, You hear a new report on the news says, oh, that was a mistake. That's been disproven. That was fake news. And immediately the demand drops. So demand goes up and down at a whim. Okay? Supply is different. Supply is quirkier. You must understand this. Supply, like for instance, if the demand for apples goes up, you can't just grow more apples. You have to buy land. You have to plant trees. You have to give them, 5 or 10 years to grow. I don't know anything about farming apples. Supply is quirky and it's difficult and it's not easy to manipulate. And go ahead and write this down. It reacts slowly. Okay? So there's demand, how much people want. Supply is what people are willing to produce. So this is more like demand is based on the idea of consumers. That's an oversimplification, but we'll go with that. And supply is from the viewpoint of businesses. All right, so let's get some definitions in here. All right, supply. All right, so write this down. What is it? It's the different quantities of a good that sellers are willing and able to sell or produce at different prices. It's the different quantities of a good that sellers are willing and able to sell, produce at different prices. Now, some products take months to make. They have huge setup costs, engineering costs. I mean, look right now with this push for a COVID vaccine. They said back in March, they had Fauci and Birx on, and they said that we should be able to have, it would not be possible to have a vaccine ready, or they said something like this. I'm not a science or medical person. I just listen to the experts and try to do what they tell me to do. And they said it would not be possible before the first of the year. And I remember sitting there thinking, we're the greatest country in the world. Certainly we can pull this off. Now the Russians claim they pull it off. We'll see if that's true or not. That'll be very interesting to see. I would make a couple of jokes here if this was AP European, but it's not. So we're going to move on about the way the Russians do things. Okay, so what is the law of supply? Now, before we talk about the law of supply, let's revisit the law of demand. The law of demand says, generally speaking, there's always exceptions to stuff. Generally speaking, as the price of something goes up, people are willing to buy less. Now, if you take micro, you'll learn about this term called elastic or inelastic. If there's some drug, let's say you have some unique disease, and there's a drug that will save your life. You will buy it if it's $5 a bottle. You will buy it if it's $10 a bottle, $20. So the law of demand doesn't really work there. If they charge $5,000 a bottle, you're going to try and come up with that. Okay? So these are general rules. Okay? The law of supply is this. And I'm going, usually we go over some examples and then I explain the law of supply, but here it is. As prices go up, producers are willing to make more. As prices go down, they're willing to make less. And once again, I hope this makes sense. Remember, you're going to hear me say this over and over and over again ad nauseum. I want to make these ideas about economics, I want you just to have them intuitively. You just understand it. And so when a politician comes along and promises something that you cannot accomplish, they're crazy. My first year teaching, they had a kid, they had an 8th grader running for student government president in the middle school I taught at. And we all trooped down to the auditorium, the whole daggum school, and this guy got up and made a speech. It was a great speech. And his main campaign promise was, how many of you hate cold chocolate chip cookies? He goes, if you elect me student government president, I will make sure that in the lunchroom they have hot chocolate chip cookies. And I remember laughing my head off. Nobody bosses those lunchroom, people around, and he got like a standing ovation over that. That's an example of a politician promising something that he cannot deliver. So here is the law of supply. Okay, so, and there's a direct relationship. Demand is I started saying negative relationship, inverse relationship. This is a direct relationship. As price increases, the quantity producers make increases. Now, I want you writing all this down. As price falls, the quantity producers make falls. Again, there's always exceptions. These are general rules. I can't think of any off the top of my head because I'm making this video at the same time to my right here. My fourth period macro is, I got some people asking me questions here. All right, moving on. Why? Because they make more of a profit. Let me say that I don't know why. It looks like this is covering the top of the screen. I don't know why people don't understand this. Some of the craziest questions I get, wait till we get to banks. Why don't banks just loan money for free? I haven't had a kid ask me this in a while, but people will seriously ask you stuff like this. Why doesn't General Motors just make cars and give them away for free? And I always, I haven't actually had anybody ask me that question, but similar to that, why don't they just give it away? Well, heck, why don't you go build a multi-trillion-dollar factory and build cars and give them away for free and deal with all the aggravations of environmental permits and rules about how many breaks you got to give your employees every few hours. I mean, I've been in the business world. I did not graduate from college and start out. I worked at a car dealership. I remember you guys, you saw my video. I got to stay on this here. People are in business to make a profit. There is no mystery to that. Again, I think I mentioned this before, where the governor of New York, Cuomo, said the other day that 50% of the taxes paid in New York are from the upper 1%. And he said something basically along the lines of, if we raise taxes on them too much more, they'll move to New Jersey or Connecticut or Maine. It's just common sense. People, if you want to give all your money away, I sympathize with you. I hope you do. But these guys are in business to make money. Okay? That's what they're there for. All right, moving on. I should not have to explain that to a bunch of seniors. All right, so here's an example, and I'm just going to tell you I love doing this every year. Have a little fun with this here. All right, so I'm having trouble fitting everything in my screen here. Here's what I want you to do. On your paper, just very quickly, make this chart. It does not have to be pretty. We're going to do a lot of this stuff. Let's say you own a lawnmower, and you are willing to mow lawns. Okay, you own a lawnmower, and you're willing to mow lawns. There are tons of people out there who do not want to work for other people, and they start a business. I know that this is a lecture designed for Wednesday, and time is short, but I feel compelled to tell this story. I knew this guy I went to church with, and he wanted to be a preacher. He wanted to go to Bible school, but to be a preacher, you got to be available Wednesday nights, and you got to be available Sunday mornings. Well, he was a manager of a KFC. As a matter of fact, he was such a good KFC manager, they were going to promote him to regional manager, which meant he would have like 15 KFCs underneath him. He was going to make a lot of money, but the problem is if you're a regional manager, you sometimes have to work 7 days a week. I mean, that's the way the business world is. When I worked for the airlines, probably 7 or 8 times in my years there, my employees worked all night. We'd get there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and, we'll say 8 o'clock in the morning, and work till 5 a.m. the next morning. We called it pulling an all-nighter. It was part of the job. I could not make my hourly workers stay. I would cut a deal with them. But as management, I worked Saturdays and Sundays. I remember one day I worked like 12 hours on a Saturday, and I got so tired, I took a bunch of counting manuals, laid them down on the carpet, and went to sleep in my office on Saturday because I was so exhausted. Part of the job, okay, if you're in management. So he couldn't do that. He didn't want to do that because he wanted to go to Bible school, trying to tell this story in a hurry. So here's what he did. He started his own lawn care service. He goes from being manager of Kentucky Fried Chicken to starting a lawn service. And what he did was he made up a big card, and his name was Bush. He named, he's a Christian guy. He named his lawn service Burning Bush Lawn Care. Okay? And so what he did was he went around passing these cards out with all his prices. And we were all like, when he told us the story, well, how did it work? He goes, well, I didn't have much business for a couple of weeks. He goes, but what you do is you get a couple of customers and you do a wonderful job. And so let's say you're charging $35 a lawn. This was a long time ago. This was over 30 years ago. He says let's say you're charging $30 a lawn. He goes, if you cut their grass and they call you 2 days later mad because you didn't weed eat along the back part of the house, you go back for free and you do it. He says, once you do a good job, they call all their friends. And their friends start calling you. Within like 6 months, he had 4 crews working for him, you understand? So you see these trucks going down the road, dragging those trailers with the lawnmowers and the weed eaters on there. He had 4 of those. And so he was manager of 4 crews. And I remember one lady hired him who lived on one of these lakes. She goes, what will you charge me to pull the weeds out of the water? I want it to look like a beach behind my property. And when we go out in the water, there's weeds. He charged her $20 an hour to pull the weeds out of his lake, right? Now, remember, this was 30 years ago. Did he pull the weeds out? No, this is capitalism. He hired a friend of mine and paid him $10 an hour to pull the weeds. My friend loved it. He's like, I went out there on a Saturday. He goes, now to you, $10 an hour may not be that much money, but this was back when a lot of people made $5 an hour. And so my friend was overjoyed that someone would pay him $10 an hour to get out in the middle of a lake and pull weeds. Meanwhile, the guy who owned the company was making $10 off this other guy doing the work, people. That is called capitalism. So, and you may laugh at this mowing lawns idea, but there's a lot of people who want to be their own boss, but they go out on their own and they start a lawn service so they can be their own boss. Okay, moving on here. All right, so now, here's what I want you to do. Now, it's going to seem a little bit ridiculous. I remember when I do this in class, I have all sorts of questions being asked to me. Okay, so, and kids always say, well, how big is the lawn? So here's what I want to do. Take you right here, right now. Let's say the lawn, okay, so normally I do this in my classroom, but you know, not one of the art or computer rooms or engineering rooms at Apopka High, but you know how big the regular rooms are? They're not very big. Let's say that this yard is twice the size of that. Okay, so it's twice the size of a regular classroom. And there's not a lot of trees, so there's not a lot of going around this and this. So it's going to be a fairly easy yard to cut. What I want you to do is on your paper right now, write these, how many yards you would cut at $1. You know, I'm assuming the answer is 0, but go ahead. I had a kid one year who said he would do one for $5. You're altruistic. I think that's the word. So for every one of these prices, I want you to write down the number that you would personally cut. Please don't put 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. All right? I am going to give you a couple minutes to do this. So what you do is you pause the video and you fill in the blanks really quickly. Okay? Unpause the video. Now, I don't know about you. I wouldn't do any for $1. I wouldn't do any for $5. $20? Probably. Because that size of the classroom, you could probably get that done in about 30 minutes. So if you could do probably less than that. So there's some, let's say you could do it in 20 minutes. And so you could do 2 lawns an hour. That's $20. That's $40 an hour. $50, I would start doing them. Many of them. $100 a lawn. I keep saying an hour because I'm trying to go in a hurry. $100 a lawn? That's where you start like giving up your regular job and you do lawns full time. $1,000 a lawn. I would get one of those headlamps, you know, like miners have, and I would get myself, you know, a whole bunch of coffee, and I would cut all day long, and I would cut half the night until I got so tired I couldn't move. Because if you did this just for a couple of months, you might have enough money to take a couple of years off. All right? So you fill these numbers out. Now, moving on. Oh, by the way, write this down. This is a supply schedule. And you actually filled in your numbers. Now, this is much easier than a demand schedule. So you went to a business person and you got these numbers filled out. All right, so anyway, let me go back to this. If you were to graph this, what you would see is the curve, instead of a demand curve which goes down to the right, this is going to slope up to the right. So demand curve goes down, a supply curve goes up. That's overly simplistic. All right, so now we're supposed to stop and take time, but I'm just going to show you this. Let's say that you had a graph for cereal, a supply curve, okay? And here's these numbers. I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted. I've got stuff going on the other computer over here. So you went and talked to, let's say in a country you had 5 cereal manufacturers, and you went to them, and they said, for $5, how many boxes of cereal would you make? And the consensus was, altogether, they added up to 50 boxes. That could be 50,000, 50 million. Don't worry about the numbers. They're just numbers. They can represent 50 trillion if you want. For $4, they would only make 40 because they're not making as much money. For $3, they'd make 30. So what I want you to think about is if you were to graph these. Now, if you really want, you can actually plot this out. But again, because if this is for a Wednesday lecture, I'm going to show you what it would do. So you would start plotting these, and what you're going to see is the curve will start in the lower left and then slope up to the right. Okay? And this is your supply curve. It shifts upward to the right. So just like I told you the other day with demand, when you walk into the back of an economics room and you see, a graph sitting up there and a line sloping downward to the right, that's a demand curve. You see one sloping upward to the right, it's a supply curve. And of course, if you go from one place to the other, there's a change in price, there's a change in quantity supplied. All right, what if new companies start making cereal? Okay, so take the last graph. Now, we didn't write it down, we looked at it. But we had a supply curve going up. So what if you have new companies moving into town, or you have companies that make something else that decide, hey, we can make some money here in the cereal business, let's start making cereal. So you have new producers moving in. How's that going to look? All right, so these were the original numbers we started with on the left. And if I'm going a little fast, and I am, don't forget that you're going to have a Clifford video to look at, and you're going to have your textbook. Remember, I call that the Trinity. 3 things. You got me, you got the textbook, and you got Clifford. And I freely admit I'm the weakest link in the deal. I can tell you that I've had lots of luck with kids passing the macro exam. So, but I understand what my limitations are. Okay, so here is the supply curve we drew. Well, now if you have new producers coming in, your supply schedule is wrong. So what you have to do is go talk to all the old producers again and the new producers and say, how many boxes would you make at these prices? Does this make sense? Remember, these curves are based on numbers. Where did the numbers come from? Okay, this is what the producers said they would make. And so I want you to watch this chart on the left. Here are the new numbers. So now your curve is wrong. You have to go replot it. And some of you that have a math background, you know how I said in one of my earlier videos that people can see things if they're really mathematically oriented. My brother-in-law, who by the way is very, very sick right now with COVID. He doesn't live here. I haven't been around him. He's in Georgia. But he's very, very sick with it. He seems to be improving. But he is, a very talented businessman. And he told me years ago, and I'm just passing along the story, that when he discusses numbers with people, he sees graphs in his head. I do not see graphs in my head. Sometimes I have visual images, but they're not graphs. But some of you may be like that. You're very mathematical, engineering, science oriented. So anyway, some of you, before we even show the graph, can tell what this thing is going to do, and it is going to shift to the right. Now, something I want to say here is this is an increase in supply. If the supply curve shifts to the right, that is an increase in supply. A shift to the left is a decrease. Demand as well, a shift to the right is an increase, and a shift to the left is a decrease. Okay. Sometimes I say just out of habit up and down, and it's confusing to my students because to me an increase in supply means supply goes up. That's not necessarily what's happening on the graph. The word increase is better than a shift upward, and I frequently have to correct myself, as you will see. All right, and this is an increase in supply. Okay, the prices didn't change, but there's more cereal being made. All right, what if a drought destroys corn and wheat crops? Now, what that means is these cereal manufacturers, let's see, what is most cereal made out of? It's made out of rice and corn and oats, and maybe there's a fourth thing, I don't remember. But whoever, these factories that are making the cereal, they have to buy their raw materials from farmers. And so if there's a drought, and let's say the drought doesn't kill all the corn and the wheat, it kills a big chunk of it, the farmers, just natural supply and demand. I know we haven't put the two together yet, but that is tomorrow. But if there's a drought, the farmers, there's going to be less supply. That means the price is going to go up. It's just going to happen. Of course, if we were in a command economy, the government could step in and say, no, here's what you have to charge, which is why in a lot of these command countries, people, have trouble getting enough food because the government comes in and says, you can only sell this product at this price, and the people making it will lose money at that price, so they just don't make it. Common sense, if your employer tells you, hey, you're making $20 an hour, tomorrow we're cutting your pay to $5 an hour, you're very likely to not show up to work. And if the government tells you you have to show up to work, you may show up to work, but you may do 3/4 less work than you were doing before. Okay? So just the natural order of things, if there's a drought, those prices for the raw materials are going to go up. I shouldn't say raw materials, the inputs, they're going to go up, which means the cereal companies are going to be willing to make less at those prices. Okay? And so what would happen is these numbers would change. Okay? They're like, hey, before they'd make 50,000 boxes at $5 a box, but now a lot of these companies, they have different cost structures, are losing money, so they're only willing to make 30,000. So those numbers, and at $1, nobody's going to make it. So what they do is they have these new numbers. You go plug these numbers in. Again, you math types can probably figure out what this curve is about to do. It is going to shift to the left, and that is a decrease. Okay, that is a decrease in supply. And I can tell you right now, we're talking about supply and demand for individual products. Eventually, we're going to be talking about the supply and demand for the whole economy. And all I got to say is, woe to the person that causes the supply curve for the United States to shift to the left. It is a lose-lose proposition. You're going to have to just believe me on that. Okay. All right, moving on here. What if cereal companies find a quicker way to make cereal? Again, I don't think that, on the next slide we're going to see the graph here. What's going to happen is, if there's a quicker way to make cereal, most of your employees are paid by the hour. So let's say you have some highly trained employees and you're paying them $40 an hour because it's what you call skilled labor. What happens is, if you have a certain amount of profit you want to make, okay? So you're willing to pay these people $40 an hour, and that's what drives the price you're willing to produce at. Then all of a sudden, you can take those same $40 an hour employees and make more cereal. What that means is now your costs have changed. You're still paying them the same amount an hour, but they're making more cereal, so you're willing to sell cereal at lower prices. And that would shift the supply curve to the right. All right, 5 factors that may change supply. Change in input prices. That's the corn and the oats and the cereal deal. Okay? Change in input prices. And so here's the thing. If input prices go up, producers are willing to make less. If input prices go down, they're willing to make more at certain prices. Changes in the price of related goods and services, changes in technology. Okay, if all of a sudden the technology to make cereal is improved, remember, for a lot of companies, your biggest cost is the cost of your employees. And so if your employees can make more cereal, you can produce more and sell it at cheaper prices. Sometimes there's a reduction in technology. Say a computer virus knocks out all the computer systems in the United States. If it did that, your employees would be able to make less, would not be able to make as much, and that would cause the supply to shift to the left. That would be a decrease in supply. Changes in expectations, what your thoughts are on the future, changes in the number of producers. These are several factors that may change supply. There's actually a bunch. That is a decrease in supply, a shift to the left. An increase in supply is a shift to the right. I just wanted you to see that. Again, I usually say supply goes up when I mean increase. And I usually say supply goes down when I should say decrease. All right. You can go ahead and look through this. Again, I have cobbled together this PowerPoint from several sources. When I was a new teacher, I had a lot of this stuff, the number of sellers. We pretty much got this. Let's see if we find anything new. Technology, we talked about that. This is new. So add this to your list of shifters. Government action, taxes and subsidies. Taxes is when the government takes money from businesses. So if you raise taxes on businesses, you're cutting their profit margins. So what they're going to do is, if they have a certain amount of money they want to make, let's say a 20% return, if you raise taxes on businesses, they're going to be willing to produce less at the prices they were producing before, and that is going to be a reduction in supply. If you decrease taxes, it is an increase in supply. I know that I'm going fast, and I remember I'm going to give you some backup videos to look at. I'm going to give you some homework this week. Subsidy is the exact opposite of a tax. That's where the government gives money to a business instead of takes it away. And so if the government subsidizes a business, it will that will be an increase in supply. So if the government's giving the business money, they can produce and sell at lower prices. So that is an increase in supply. And that's how, if they take a subsidy away, that is a decrease in supply. And some kids in AP World said they were having to stop my videos so much to get their notes in time that I might need to make them a little bit shorter. I'm actually going to stop here so you can try and get all these notes done on a Wednesday.